Welcome. I'm John Pagan, your speaker, and first and foremost, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us tonight. The purpose of this listening session is to review all of the proposed resolutions that have been submitted for consideration by the House at this year's annual meeting. PA Med and all of Pennsylvania are honored by all the work you are doing this year under emergency and very difficult conditions. The speakers recognize that this year is anything but business as usual and understand that PA Med resolutions may not be on the top of everyone's mind. For that reason, the focus of this year's resolutions are urgent issues facing your practices and your patients where PA Med needs to urgently advocate. We thank all of the authors that focused on these most urgent topics. Additionally, know that your leadership and staff have been going nonstop COVID, working on all other pandemic challenges that our members are facing. Please be sure to check out the work that the Corona Response Team, or CRT, has done and is still doing on the website. This evening, we're going to go over also some training on this platform, and we're going to do a couple of test polling questions, which will be very similar to the voting function during the House of Delegates meeting. Our first poll question tonight. The COVID pandemic has affected my practice this year. Please choose the degree to which the pandemic has affected your practice. Severely, moderately, minimally, not at all. Give you a couple more seconds. Okay, Chris. And you see your result. The majority of you said moderately, some severe, some minimally, and a few not at all. So basically, that's how the voting function will work at the House, and I thank you for participating in that. The speakers are indebted to the wise insights from the speakers panel, who are composed of TJ Huckleberry, as well as Drs. Wilma Light, Joe Laskus, Eileen Moser, Ed Balaban, Bruce McLeod, Marty Trickinger, Marilyn Heine, and Lindsay Surace. Indeed, in this special year, under these special circumstances, this group has helped navigate how we can have this historic remote meeting. Our bylaws have unique constraints on what we can do and what we cannot do in a meeting, and although many societies have outright postponed their meeting entirely or deferred most of their issues to next year, our board and you have asked us to do as much as possible. This panel has guided us through many hurdles and continues to do so. The speakers also greatly appreciate the Rules Committee, who are working hard to make sure this meeting runs smoothly under the leadership of Tim Pelkowski, with the committee members of Jay Rothkopf, Jill Owens, Carmen Spinney, Ray Truex, and Dan Kimball. They are adding whatever additions we need in these remote circumstances. Indeed, a remote meeting session cannot duplicate the many things we do in person and will necessarily not be the same. Some important changes to keep in mind are, this remote platform may be easily accessible and adaptable to some of our delegates and more challenging for others. It is essential that all participating delegates, alternates, and voting members complete and feel comfortable on this platform. Tonight will be the first training session along with our review, and there will be other webinars and assistance to follow. In order to be seated and voting, all voting participants will need to complete and attest to training and feeling comfortable with this platform. The format. Due to Zoom fatigue and other remote challenges, the majority of your delegate business will be in a single multi-hour session on Saturday morning. Delegates should prepare to be on their computers with continuous internet connectivity until about noon on Saturday. This session is most analogous to our Sunday morning HOD session when we are live, when the reference committees present their recommendations in the form of a consent calendar. Debate. The format and time constraints do not permit debate on the floor of the House during this meeting. Please make sure to enter your testimony through the PAMED website portal so that your voices are heard and the reference committee can consider all perspectives as they make their report. The virtual testimony is now open and will continue to be open through October 7th. The reference committee will then deliberate all opinions and issue their report in advance of the HOD. The choices for any extracted resolutions from the calendar will then be for the delegates to vote to adopt, not adopt, or refer the reference committee suggestions, amendments, or return to the original resolution for adoption or non-adoption. Referrals to the board would be for further study or action and report back to the next year's House for reconsideration. Elections. Although we begin using the Election Buddy platform that we have successfully used in our prior years, delegates will now be physically separated as they cast your votes. And because there is no floor in the remote House of Delegates, any later candidates who want to be considered must get all of their information submitted 1 week before the House of Delegates to be on the ballot so that our delegates can review the qualifications in advance. Lastly, because of the potential for runoffs, we are asking our voting delegates to be available to receive messages throughout Saturday afternoon and evening. There is also a remote possibility of a vote Sunday morning, but we are working hard to conclude all our business on Saturday. There are many other necessary changes that are best followed and seen on the PAMED HOD webpage. Please look at those and note the important remaining deadlines for this HOD, along with much more background and explanation. I'd next like to a moment to introduce Dr. Todd Herzberg, our Vice Speaker of the House, who has joined us tonight and will be monitoring your questions that you submit through the Q&A function that you see below your screen as you move your cursor. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Herzberg.
Hello, everyone. I just want to thank you for joining us. As Dr. Pagan said, if there's any questions that come up that you want to ask, I'll be monitoring the Q&A and filtering them with staff and directing them to Dr. Pagan so we can keep things moving. I just wanted to thank everyone for attending.
Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Chris Hartman, the Senior Director of Information Technology at PAMED, who's going to give us some useful information on navigating the virtual HOD platform. Chris?
Thank you, Dr. Pagan. Additional information will be distributed regarding the virtual platform registration, but for the main House session, the technology will be based on Zoom. Therefore, I would like to show you this video that will outline the various Zoom features that delegates will use. In this meeting that we're currently on, anyone registered for this ORB review will have the ability to use these Zoom features. But during the live session of the House of Delegates, only credentialed delegates will have access to these features. I will go ahead and share this video with you. Hello, and welcome to the Pennsylvania Medical Society House of Delegates Zoom training. As a delegate, you will be entering into a Zoom webinar with the ability to type a question or comment in the Q&A section, raise your hand to be recognized, speak when called upon to speak, and cast a vote for a resolution or other House business. Before reviewing these important Zoom functions, I would first like to review the audio settings. This is an essential step in making sure that you have the best overall experience. In the bottom left-hand corner of the Zoom window on most computers, you will notice an audio settings menu. If you click on the up arrow, then you can choose audio settings, and a new window will open. Here you can select different speakers to ensure that you can hear, and you can also, if you have multiple speakers installed, and then you can also choose the test speaker button to make sure that you can hear the output. You can also do the same thing for your microphone. If you have multiple microphones, you can make sure that the proper one is selected and choose test mic. This is an important option if you are called upon to speak, so please make sure that your mic is tested and working properly. If you're using an iPad or other type of tablet, it's possible that you'll have to tap the screen and select your audio settings from the top menu. When using tablets or smart devices, you will need to download the Zoom app from the App Store or Play Store. So let's talk about the Q&A button. The Q&A button is a place where you can ask a question or post a comment that can be answered by PAMed staff. This area is not meant as a platform to be recognized to speak or for posting comments speaking for or against a resolution. It should be used for more benign questions or comments such as this. Is there a difference between resolution voting and election voting? And once I submitted this question, a PAMed employee would answer back, yes, there is a difference between election voting. Election voting will take place after the recess using Election Buddy, and resolution voting takes place live through the Zoom platform. And so I would get that answer that way. You could also just type in additional questions in the text question and answer box here. Now, if for some reason there is an issue with someone's microphone and the speaker cannot hear the delegate when recognized, this would be an acceptable place to pose the question, but only because you have been recognized by the speaker. So let's now talk about the raise hand and speak option. In order to be recognized to speak during the House of Delegates, you must click the raise hand button towards the bottom, which will place you in a queue with others in the order in which your hand was raised. By clicking this button here, you'll notice that it turns blue and it also changes to lower hand. When recognized by the speaker to speak, the Zoom moderator will allow you to speak. A pop-up window will come up on your screen that says the host would like you to unmute. Click the unmute button, and then you will be able to speak for the allotted time in which the speaker is allowed. Once finished, the moderator will then remove your privilege to speak and will lower your hand. And lastly, delegates will have the opportunity to vote on resolutions and other House business. When the speaker announces that a vote is necessary, the item being voted on will be broadcast to all delegate screens. Delegates can then make their selections. The screen will pop up, the delegate makes the selection, chooses the submit button, and it is then submitted to the overall vote. Once the voting has ended, the moderator will then share the results, and all will be able to see the results of that vote. This concludes our Zoom webinar training. If at any time you experience technical difficulty, there will be an email address and a phone number to call to receive technical support during the meeting. This will be posted on the House of Delegates virtual platform page. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and we hope that it helps you to feel more prepared as you attend our virtual House of Delegates meeting this October. Okay, so thank you very much for watching that. And at the very end, as Dr. Pagan had mentioned, we will also have an additional training, and we can have some follow-up there if anyone has any questions on the Zoom platform. But back to you, Dr. Pagan.
Thanks so much, Chris. We appreciate all the time and effort that you and your staff have put into preparations for this year House of Delegates. Again, this remote format has made things much different. So we are reinventing things, and it is far harder to put together a remote meeting, especially for the first time, than our usual in-person meeting. So much appreciation throughout this and throughout the whole event to staff. We now have a second polled question. So hopefully you've gotten the hang of it and we've gotten some of the bugs out there. I am very excited about the upcoming remote 2020 HOD. Yes or no? I am very excited about the upcoming remote 2020 HOD. Give you a couple more seconds. Okay. Most of us are excited, so that's good. Our work is not in vain as we go forward here. Let's get started with the review. We're going to begin with Bylaws Committee, which is Reference Committee A. Bylaws Committee, you may know, is one of the unique House committees that works year-round. So they actually started their work before COVID, and they had to make adjustments on the fly when the Board of Trustees foresaw that meeting in person this fall was going to be challenging, and the in-person meeting was canceled. They then adjusted their agenda and their work. This was under the leadership of Candace Kim, with Dr. Peter Lund, Chandra Hotke, Kristen Sandell, and Hans Zuckerman, with Mike Siggett, our counsel, as lead support, helped by Andrew Harvin and Ellen Yazinski. So you see in front of you, now there are 5 different sections or subjects to this. The first 2 come specifically from the Bylaws Committee and actually specifically deal with the emergency provisions, which they found lacking in our existing bylaws when faced with this pandemic. So these provide guidance to the House and the Board should an emergency event occur in the future that disrupts the holding of a member meeting, and they are only activated upon a vote of the board that an emergency condition exists and become dormant again at the end of the emergency condition. The second amendment coming straight from the Bylaws Committee is proposed amendments providing flexibility of the business conducted and the fixed terms of office. This dovetails with the first proposed emergency provisions that our bylaws have become very complex and intertwined over the years. These second provisions will help make things more nimble and adaptable so that in both in-person meetings and in remote meetings, we can meet more efficiently in that. You'll see that in this remote meeting, we're doing a lot of things because the bylaws requires us to do that. Future meetings could be more flexible with these proposals in front of you. They provide for more opportunity for member input through in-person, online, and other methods. They streamline the terms of office using specific calendar dates and calendar years rather than being contingent and dependent upon an actual meeting date. And they provide more flexibility for annual, additional, and other meetings of the delegates as required. Next, we have independently proposed bylaws amendments from sections regarding their own governance and their representation. Number 1 is the proposed amendments to bylaws governing the women's physician section. This allows the WPS chair and vice chair to potentially serve as delegates. This also allows language for the internal governance of the WPS section, allowing medical students and residents and fellow sections to be on their governing council. Next is proposed amendments from the International Medical Graduate section. This increases the IMG section delegate representation in the House from 1 to 13 delegates. And this also creates an IMG governing council's language and revises aspects of the section business meeting. And next, from the medical student section, proposed amendments that clarify that the medical student section selects the alternate delegate-elect to the AMA House of Delegates. And it also clarifies internal governance that specifies the representatives of MSS must remain medical students for the duration of their terms. So that completes the bylaws proposals. Next, we have the 2020 Special House of Delegates Reference Committee. Now, this is a special reference committee this year because it is a single reference committee. They were charged with dealing with the focused issues, those priorities facing your practices and your patients this year. But they are also allowing testimony on other issues and resolutions that were submitted as well. This committee has also been working hard in advance of the House, has met several times and will continue to meet under the leadership of Mark Goodman as chair, with Mukul Parikh, Judy Priblick, Arlene Sade, Lindsay Serace, and Tib Welby as committee members. Heather Wilson is the lead staff on this, with Lauren Martini, Jennifer Swinich, Dave Thompson as well. First will be the Board of Trustee reports. These are reports that were requested by the House last year, and they are reporting back on their status. First is Board Report number 2, which echoes back to Resolution 19504, which calls on PA Med to allow membership access to voting records of elected representatives of PA Med and to publish those records. The report follows, considering those recommendations and the testimony heard, and those recommendations can be seen at the end. Board Report number 3, echoing back to Resolution 19505, and Board of Trustee Report number 4 are combined with Resolution 19508. Called for the convening of a task force to study and make recommendations to allow regional medical societies to coalesce and to address appropriate and balanced representation at the HOD and on the board. The board combined these two. The task force is meeting and will continue to meet into 2021 in anticipation that bylaws changes will be recommended accordingly. These need to be thoroughly evaluated and debated in person during the PA Med House of Delegates 2021. Board of Trustee Report number 5, which is the Sunset Policy Review. Policies are evaluated and reviewed annually on the 10th anniversary of their adoption and recommended to be retained in part, or rescinded. All policies are reviewed, but not readopted, automatically expire at the conclusion of this year's HOD meeting. The board implements this resolution by overseeing the sunsetting process and bringing a report with recommendations to the House each year. Next is Board of Trustee Report number 6, membership dues categories. Board of Trustees Report 6 outlines the dues categories and amounts for the 2021 dues cycle, and those recommendations are contained in Board Report number 6. We next have the resolutions considered also under the special 2020 REFCOM. And these are the focus resolutions dealing with the urgent issues as requested for this year. So Resolution 2204, Emergency Pandemic Guidelines. This advocates for a pandemic preparedness plan, advocates for studies of disease containment strategies, and works with appropriate stakeholders to determine protocols. Next is Resolution 2207, Protecting the food supply during a pandemic. Working together with government resources to protect food supply chains during a pandemic, form a task force to make urgent recommendations regarding food shortages and food safety, and disseminate information to members and state authorities. Next, Resolution 20-301, Aid for Healthcare Workers. This requests PA Med advocate for hazard pay during pandemic and other national public health emergency declarations, and PA Med AMA delegation to introduce this resolution at the next AMA House of Delegates meeting. I'll make a small comment, and this is applies to some of the other resolutions you'll hear below. As you know, the AMA, as well as many other state and national specialty organizations, are modifying how they meet this year. They too need to focus the agendas of their meetings, especially in a remote format. Any AMA request for an AMA delegation action is contingent upon what the AMA will accept. So one of the things to consider is many of these resolutions call for this to be brought forth to the next AMA meeting. The next AMA meeting will follow shortly in the fall after our House meeting, and it may not be possible to introduce all of these topics by constraint of the AMA. So please keep that in mind. I know our delegation will bring forth whatever it is possible, but it may be impossible to mandate that these be brought forth at the next AMA meeting. Next, we're going to Resolution 2302, Data Collection on Healthcare Workers. This advocates for data collection and public reporting on the number of healthcare workers who died due to COVID-19, and advocates for automatic DOH data collection and public reporting on healthcare workers as a result of any future pandemics within the Commonwealth. Resolution 20-406, COVID liability protections. This calls on PA Med to work to give PA physicians retroactively liability protection for treating patients with COVID-19 and support emergency legislation to allow physicians to treat COVID patients as they see fit. Resolution 20-407, physician supervision following end of disaster declaration. This resolution seeks to support the return of physician supervision requirements and scope of practice regulations following the expiration of the emergency declaration executive order, and strongly oppose legislative efforts to extend the waiver. Resolution 20-501, employment of residency fellowship grads during a pandemic. This resolution seeks to support residents and fellows facing job insecurity in Pennsylvania and create a mentorship program, recommend to CMS additional direct GME and IME payments to train graduate residents and fellows, and endorse student loan forgiveness efforts. Resolution 502, although not directly speaking to the pandemic, does call for peer support programs during crisis. And this resolution recommends peer mentorship programs to provide support, and recommend the use of opt-out mental health counseling, recommend implementation of partnering programs during times of crisis, to take this issue to the AMA, to the next AMA House of Delegates meeting, and to provide resources explaining how to develop peer mentor programs. Once again, the same caveat for any calls to the AMA delegations, as they may not be able to. The remainder of the resolutions under the REFCOM 2020 were not necessarily focused on this year's topic, but were submitted, and the reference committee will hear testimony on them. Depending on the volume and the ability, the reference committee will then make recommendations accordingly for these resolutions that were outside of the focus request. So Resolution 20-408, assistant physicians, to work with the Pennsylvania Legislature and Governor's Office to seek legislation to license associate and assistant physicians to practice in Pennsylvania under the authority of the state boards of medicine and osteopathic medicine in underserved areas of the state. Resolution 2201, racism as a public health issue. Identify racism as a public health issue, optimize ways to address effects of racism on children and adolescents, and disseminate resources and educational tools to dismantle systemic racism in healthcare. Resolution 20-202, organ transplant equity for persons with disabilities. This calls for support protection from discrimination for people with disabilities for transplant surgeries. PA Med AMA delegation to take this to the 2021 AMA interim HOD meeting and work with relevant stakeholders to distribute anti-discrimination educational materials. Resolution 2203, healthcare equity for persons with disabilities. Advocate for policies ensuring equitable access to healthcare and resources for people with disabilities, and work with relevant stakeholders to distribute information and guidelines to conduct research as necessary. Resolution 2205, gender equity in medicine. This calls for PA Med to promote and endorse equal opportunities for employment and practice in the medical field amongst genders. 2206, Organization of Physicians. This asks PA Med to work to create ways for physicians to compete as a single organization with hospital, payer, insurance, legal, and technology entities. Resolution 20-208, increasing residency positions. This calls for the PA Med AMA delegation to introduce a resolution at the next AMA meeting to seek to increase the cap of Medicare support for GME and support alternative forms of GME funding. Once again, the caveat for AMA delegation of directives. Resolution 20-401 to rescind level 2 requirements for licensure. This asks PA Med to advocate for the state to rescind USMLE Step 2 CS and complex level 2 PE examination requirements as part of licensure. The PA Med AMA delegation to present this issue at the next AMA House of Delegates and to work with the PA government to create alternative low-cost requirements. Resolution 20-402, restrictive covenants, AMA. This asks PA Med to reaffirm policy opposing restrictive covenants, and if reaffirmed, ask the AMA to reaffirm this policy as well. Resolution 20-403, making PHC4 datasets free. This asks for the Healthcare Cost Containment Council to advocate for free and open access to state all-payer claims database information for academic research, and to present the issue to the AMA at the next House of Delegates meeting. Resolution 20-404, to end exclusive contracting. This asks PA Med to actively pursue legislation to end exclusive contracting and allow online reporting to PA Med by member physicians and seek legal action to enforce the Clayton Antitrust Act and seek assistance through the AMA regarding antitrust litigation and regulatory enforcement. Resolution 20-405, restrictive covenants. This asks the PA Med to adopt a new position on the use of restrictive covenants, which offers compromise, and support new legislation limiting restrictive covenants, non-compete clauses to reasonable terms. Resolution 20-503, disparities of physician workforce and healthcare. This asks PA Med to develop a plan to increase number of minority physicians in Pennsylvania, review minority representation and leadership roles at PA Med, and advocate for revisions to medical school admissions, policies, and collaborate to develop plans of increasing minority student interest in STEM courses. Well, thank you. Again, this is just a brief overview. Delegates are expected to review each of these policies in detail, along with the accompanying resources and fiscal implications before presenting to the House. You are again encouraged to comment on the virtual testimony platform. And I'd like to give the floor back to Chris Hartman one last brief time before we finish up tonight to review the platform and technical aspects. Chris?
Thank you, Dr. Pagan. So it seems like there was a lot of question and answering going on. So definitely had a lot of people actively engaged in the Q&A. So I'd like to, anyone who's joining on just the phone option will not be able to participate in this because it's more of the Zoom interactive platform, and that will be the case during the House of Delegates as well. You do have to be on a computer or a smart device. So let's try and have some individuals raise their hand just so that you can feel comfortable. You can test that out, and then I will go ahead and it puts you in a queue. Looks like everybody's raising their hand well. I will just randomly spot check a few people and allow you to talk. When you get a pop-up on your screen, I'd like you to choose the unmute option just so that you can just say a word or two. So Okay, I am going to Laia Manoj. You're
Hi, it's working for me.
excellent. Thank you very much. So I'll lower your hand and I will remove the talking ability. Okay, and we will go with Dr. Timothy Polkowski.
Yep. Hello from Erie.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I will choose one other. Let's see. We've got here. I am not going to say who it is, and we'll see if everyone's watching. Okay.
Hi, yeah, it works.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You're paying attention. That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so I think everyone has the understanding of how to raise their hand and be recognized. And so I'm going to lower all hands, and everyone will start back at square one. And we have another poll coming up, so we'll test that out. And right now, I'm going to just, if you have a question that you'd like answered, by all means, please post it in the Q&A about anything technically that we've gone over tonight, and we will answer that. And if we need to, we'll reach out to you. So thank you very much, and I'll send it back to you, Dr. Pagan.
Well, thank you. And once again, thanks for a job well done. And note that the beauty of technology is that we are able to adjust on the fly, and this is why we're having a training session tonight. It works both ways, and we're learning as well there. With the polling, I understand that there were a couple of people, and I think I heard Chris say that it kind of depends on the platform that you're accessing. We're recommending a computer platform for the live House of Delegates meeting, as well as for these training sessions. Smartphones may not all have the same at least visualization and access there. The other thing, Chris, and I don't know if you could do it, we'll do one more poll now for everyone, and we'll give you a couple seconds to answer too. So we'll post it that I've found this ORB review and training session helpful tonight, yes or no. And the request that we've gotten from some is that the answer be given in absolute numbers of votes in addition or instead of percentages. So I don't know if you can switch on the fly, Chris, and after this vote is cast, give us absolute numbers in addition or instead of the ORB training.
Yeah, I can give you the numbers. I'm just working on making sure that it's visible online. And no matter what, we'll be able to do that. But if I can't do that right now, I'll tell you the numbers.
Okay.
Are you ready to end the polling? Okay. So,
so I see the poll results. I don't know if everyone else does, and I see 96% to 4%.
Do you see the numbers?
I do not see absolute numbers.
94 yes and 4 no.
Okay, almost mirrors the percentages given our participation tonight. So there, and I assume then if I can't see it, then the rest of the delegates cannot see that either. So that's something we're going to need to work on going forward. I had a little omission earlier on the Rules and Credentials Committee. Ginny Hall has also been a valuable member of the committee and participant. My apologies for glossing over her name as I read my list earlier. And of course, none of this would be possible without the tireless work of our PA Med staff who continually do the impossible and do it under tight time frames and circumstances. And you know, not the least is the one answering many emails, many questions is Ellen Yazinski, who's our House Operations Administrator. Chris Hartman, you've heard from tonight, working all things IT. Mike Siggett, our PA Med Counsel. Andrew Harvin, also PA Med Counsel, Ed Brown with operations. These are all meeting weekly with the speakers and going through all of these things. And this has gone on all year long with additional meetings in preparation for this remote house. Additionally, supporting Claire Shearer in communications, Jeff Wyrick, also in outreach and PR, Heather Wilson as Deputy EVP, and many, many more that I don't want to neglect, but at the same time want to go efficiently through this meeting under the guidance of Marty Ranowski. Dr. Herzberg, any concluding remarks or comments that you have?
Yeah, so you all kept me pretty busy tonight, hopping with questions, and I did my best to answer them where I can. We have 136 people on this call tonight. That's what my screen's showing. So it's pretty good turnout. Several of you started sending comments about the issues. Addressing questions about the resolutions. This would all be perfect and appropriate as virtual testimony, and I tried to direct you to use the online forum to submit this to the reference committee for debate. The purpose of tonight was really to sort of lay out the landscape of here's the resolutions, reports, and bylaws changes that are proposed, and not to necessarily get into the details of that. The other questions, there were several technical issues that I think Chris mostly addressed. And part of this is to sort of do a demo and guinea pig everything to see how it works. One of the questions was asked, video was turned off for this call. I don't know if we are not having that in our HOD. I don't know if IT could help us with that or not, but lots of good questions, lots of good feedback, and we will continue to work on these. Please do go to the PA Med website page. At the top right is the HOD link. If you log in, you can see all the material. There's an excellent calendar on the right that you can scroll through for all sorts of important dates and deadlines. It's really a great resource, and I would really encourage everyone to go there and go there often for the material you need to prepare for the meeting. And thank you.
Thank you. And again, this is a work in progress. A lot has gone into bringing us to this point. Again, in closing, I want to remind everybody that if you haven't done so already, visit the website, pamedsot.org HOD, where members can provide feedback on the resolutions, board reports, and proposed bylaws amendments that we reviewed tonight. We strongly encourage you to share your input through this mechanism, as in-person verbal testimony is not possible in the virtual remote House of Delegates that we're going to have. We also encourage you to visit the website often, as important documents, dates, and details about this HOD are being uploaded regularly. A lot of your questions can be answered in the HOD FAQ, which is posted in the Have a Question About the 2020 House of Delegates box in the center of the HOD webpage. Questions regarding this view or any other HOD specific issues may also be submitted to Ellen via email, and we will individually answer any questions that we did not get to tonight. But again, thanks to Dr. Herzberg and staff for going through your vigorous participation. Thank you very much for taking the time to participate. I look forward to joining you online beginning at 9 a.m. on Saturday, October 24th. This meeting tonight is recorded so that your colleagues who did not get to participate live tonight at least can see that. And Chris Hartman's training video will also be available separately as well. We'll come up with other training based on the feedback that we have tonight. And with that, I ask you to continue to stay safe. Appreciate all you do for your patients and PA Med and your fellow Pennsylvania physicians. And with that, we are adjourned.